I want to thank Rabbi Yonatan Friedman for asking me to give the Gush Alumni Dvar Torah on Parashat Pekudei. At the end of Parashat Pekudei, what seems to be perhaps an uneventful or not terribly celebrated moment is Vayachas ha'anan et ha'oh ha'ma'od kvod Hashem maleh et mishkan, that the presence of God comes to settle on the mishkan. And really, this is the end of three stories which are remarkably parallel to each other, that really, I think, need to be seen as the three stories that are interwoven as the second half of the book of Shemot. The Ramban lets us know that the Mishkan and the story of Har Sinai are the same story. And really, the three stories that I'm talking about are the story of Har Sinai, of Revelation, the story of the building and construction of the Mishkan, of a place for God's presence to dwell. And the third story would be the story of the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. And all three of these stories are really the story of how do we bring Hashem into this world, or at least attempt to bring God into this world. And I have to credit Shai Held for some very profound insights in terms of how all these three of these stories come together. But when you look at these stories, let's just take Har Sinai and the Mishkan first. First, you see that with respect to Sinai, it says, Lo yuchal ha'am la'alot el Har Sinai. The people couldn't go up to Har Sinai. And the cloud, the Kvod Hashem, comes down on Har Sinai. The presence of God, the glory of God comes onto Har Sinai in an anan, in a cloud. Similarly, with respect to the Mishkan, in these very verses that we just read here at the end of Parashat Pekudei, we note that it is the glory of God, that very same word, Kvod Hashem, comes to fill the Mishkan. And again, it comes in the same format, in the form of an anan, a cloud. And we're essentially know that there are restrictions against Bnei Yisrael from entering into this space where the cloud is. Even Moshe actually has trouble entering once the cloud appears in the Mishkan. So you have this restricted space with Hashem's presence that comes in both of them. The point of the stories is that we're going to come out of Egypt and we're going to come to this moment where we want to encounter the divine and we want to keep that encounter with the divine going. And the Mishkan is going to be a very painstaking and detail-oriented way in which we can absorb Hashem's presence in our midst. And the Mishkan has lots of details. It has lots of directions. It has restrictions. It has orders. It has places where people are going to go. The parallel with the golden calf, though, is really quite profound. In both scenarios, the people are told, in the case of the Mishkan, V'ikhu li truma, gather for me gold, silver, etc., the various material components that are needed to build this Mishkan. In parallel with the Egel HaZahav, with the story of the golden calf, it's Pirku nismei hazahav, parku et nismei hazahav. Aaron tells them, take off your gold, your sons, your daughters, bring me the gold. And it is in both scenarios where the religious object, so to speak, is created. Now here's where the differences are quite profound. The golden calf is something that has sort of an unrestricted energy. It has sort of ecstasy to it, almost an unbounded, even the idea of sexuality, the idea of kol anot gvura, kol anot chalusha, kol anot anochi shamea, the voices, the unrestricted voices that surround the golden calf, the idea of tzchok, of this sort of sexual lack of license that surrounds the golden calf, this visceral and pure emotional aspect that surrounds the golden calf, which is contrasted to sort of the orderly and detailed practice of the Mishkan. And one way to think about this is the golden calf is bringing God down into this world to serve you. That it is, they tell Aaron, make for us a God, because Zeh Moshe Ha'ish, we've lost Moshe, but we need a God. And the God becomes the God that serves them. And I think it's no accident that later on, the story of the golden calf, when we get into the book of Malachim, the story of Yeravam ben Nevat is that the calf serves his politics. The calf is something which serves the people, as opposed to the mishkan is where the people come to serve God. That the idea is that the mishkan demands externally of you. It demands scrupulousness and detail and discipline and artistry and input and thought and careful planning, whereas the egel is just a pure and unrestricted energy, an attempt to make God serve our needs. And it's in this contrast that Pekudei comes to its true climax. Because only after we have waded through all of the details, we have been told that everything has been fulfilled, all of the strictures, all the minutiae, all the details, all the craftsmanship, all of the donations have been accounted for, that in that sense of discipline can we actually bring God down into our midst, as opposed to the ego, which is an attempt to force God to serve our needs. It's a very strong contrast, but it's a very important one, that Hashem is something which demands of us, which asks us to grow, asks us to have discipline, as opposed to God being something which just serves our needs, impulses in an ecstatic and undisciplined fashion. I hope that this has brought you some insight into the end of the book of Shemot and Parashat Pekudei.